The CEO chuckled as Tanisha's Christmas wish flashed on the office projector. A doll that looks like me. The room erupted in laughter. Maybe ask Santa for better ideas. He smirked, eyes locking on her, as the cameras kept rolling. No one stood up. No one stopped him. But what he didn't know was that the stupid wish he mocked would destroy his career, and someone inside the company was already planning to help her do it. Before we deep dive into this interesting story, subscribe to our channel, and tell us where are you watching from. Share in the comments below. The glass-walled conference room had been transformed into something almost unrecognizable. Silver tinsel clung to the edges of whiteboards that once displayed sprint deadlines. A plastic Christmas tree blinked with cheap LED lights near the window, its reflection doubling against the downtown skyline. Music played softly through a Bluetooth speaker, the kind of safe corporate holiday playlist designed not to offend anyone. This was supposed to be the moment where the company proved it cared about its people. End-of-year celebration. The reward for long nights, missed weekends, and swallowed frustration. For Tenisha Moore, standing near the back of the room with a paper cup of lukewarm cider, it felt more like a performance she had never auditioned for but was forced to attend. She had worn her best blazer, the one she saved for moments that mattered. She knew appearances counted here. As the only black woman on the product development floor, she had learned early that excellence alone was never enough. You had to look grateful, polished, non-threatening. Her manager had told her weeks ago that this holiday party would be important, that leadership would be watching. Promotions were quietly being discussed. Names were floating. Tanisha's had been mentioned, she was told, with a smile that suggested generosity rather than acknowledgement of merit. That promise sat heavy in her chest, now as employees laughed and clustered around the long table stacked with wrapped gifts. The CEO, Grant Holloway, stood at the center of it all, like a benevolent host, tall, confident, perfectly at ease in a tailored sweater that cost more than most employees' rent. He tapped a glass with a spoon, drawing attention effortlessly. Conversations died down. Phones lifted instinctively. The moment was being recorded, streamed internally for remote employees. Transparency, they called it. Culture. Grant joked about the company's growth, about resilience, about how they were all one big family. Tanisha listened closely, as she always did, searching for clues. She noticed how often his eyes slid past her, how her presence barely registered in his sweeping gaze. Then came the gifts, big ones first. Senior engineers laughed as they unwrapped tablets. A sales lead who golfed with Grant held up a voucher for a luxury cruise, the room erupting in applause. Each ek felt like a public ranking, a hierarchy disguised as generosity. Finally, Grant clapped his hands and announced something new. A tradition, he said. A Christmas wish segment. Employees had been asked to submit anonymous wishes earlier that week. Small things, big dreams, a way to connect as humans. The words sounded warm, rehearsed. Tanisha remembered filling out the form late one night, hesitating before typing anything at all. She almost deleted it. But she hadn't. She had written about a toy she wished existed when she was a child. A simple idea, rooted in representation, in feeling seen. She had ended it with a line about how kids deserve to recognize themselves in the world they were sold. Grant scrolled through the wishes on the screen behind him, reading a few aloud. Some were jokes, some were indulgent. The room responded accordingly. Then he paused, smiled wider. He read Tanisha's wish out loud, word for word. At first she didn't realize it was her. It sounded distant, abstract, until her chest tightened, and recognition hit her like a sudden drop. The room grew quiet, confused. Grant chuckled, not cruelly, not loudly, just enough. That's ambitious, he said, dragging the word out. He looked around, inviting reaction. A few people laughed uncertainly. He added something about how the company wasn't a charity, how product ideas needed to be marketable, and how not every emotional concept belonged in a serious business environment. His tone was light, but the message was sharp. He joked about Christmas miracles, about how some wishes belonged in storybooks. The laughter grew, more comfortable now that permission had been granted. Tanisha felt the heat crawl up her neck. She could feel eyes on her, even if no one said her name. Her anonymity was a thin illusion. The room knew. They always knew. Grant finished the segment with a shrug, moved on as if nothing significant had happened. Applause followed. Music resumed. The moment dissolved for everyone else. For Tanisha, it crystallized. She stood frozen for a few seconds longer than necessary, then quietly set her cup down and walked toward the exit. No one stopped her. No one asked if she was okay. The hallway outside was dimmer, quieter, the muffled sound of celebration bleeding through the glass. She took a breath she didn't realize she'd been holding. Her reflection stared back at her from the darkened window, composed, silent, smaller than she felt moments ago. As she walked past the conference room again, she glanced inside one last time. Grant had already moved on, laughing with executives near the screen behind him. The presentation deck was still open, a list of internal notes visible for just a second before someone noticed and tried to minimize it. But Tenisha saw it, clear enough to register before disbelief took over. A short list for upcoming promotions, names she recognized, names she didn't, and then as Grant scrolled, her name flickered and vanished. It wasn't dramatic. No announcement, no explanation, just a quiet deletion, swallowed by the glow of the screen and the noise of celebration. Tenisha kept walking, her steps steady even as something inside her cracked open, realizing that the joke hadn't ended in the room. It had followed her out, and it was only just beginning. Monday arrived like a punishment. The glitter from Friday's holiday party had been vacuumed up, but the air still carried traces of what had happened, unspoken yet deeply felt. The office smelled like coffee and artificial pine from an abandoned candle in the break room. Tenisha Moore walked in exactly on time, not a minute early, not a second late. It was intentional. She wasn't going to give them the satisfaction of seeing her retreat or panic. But from the moment her heels tapped against the laminate floor, she could feel the shift. The temperature wasn't just cold, it was calculated. No one acknowledged her presence. Not really. A few nods, some faint morning mumbles that barely rose above whispers. Her desk looked the same, but it felt alien. Her monitor greeted her with a login screen, like it didn't know her anymore. The silence was loud. Too loud. Last week she'd been in Slack group chats filled with ideas, jokes, check-ins. Now the threads moved without her. Messages pinged that didn't include her name. Her team had always been small but close until now. They weren't being hostile. They were being surgical. At 9:15 a.m., she noticed the first cut. A meeting invite. She normally led. The Monday product sprint kickoff was still on the calendar. But when she clicked the Zoom link, the host had changed. She was locked out. No access. Her role had quietly been reassigned without notice. Tenisha stared at the screen, watching her team trickle into the virtual room without her. No one messaged to ask why she wasn't there. No one seemed surprised. She stood and walked to the break room, more to breathe than for coffee. The room went still when she entered, as if her presence interrupted a frequency they didn't want her tuned into. Two junior designers who used to tag her in memes instantly went quiet, eyes dropping to their cups. She poured herself coffee. She didn't want just to avoid leaving empty-handed. Behind her, someone whispered, "She's still coming in?" The words weren't meant to be cruel, but they echoed in her ears with the weight of betrayal. The worst part wasn't the ridicule. It was the rewriting of the story. She could feel it happening in real time. The party had been a joke, sure, but now it was being rebranded as harmless, funny, misunderstood. People were starting to pretend that what Grant had said was just playful, that she had overreacted. Some were even starting to reframe her wish itself as naive, out of place, not business savvy. This was the real erasure. Not loud, quiet, strategic. That's how it always started. First, you're humiliated. Then you're framed as the problem. Finally, you disappear. By Tuesday, her desk felt like it belonged to someone else. She had contributed to this company for 4 years, helped design their highest performing product line, and written code that saved a major client relationship. But this week, no one remembered any of that. Not aloud. Her Slack profile still read product lead, but the responsibilities had been stripped like a title on a sinking ship. Every time she tried to insert herself into a conversation or propose a fix to a bug, she was either ghosted or redirected. "Oh, Jake's handling that now. We're pivoting direction. Loop in Connor on that." There were new gatekeepers around every corner, all white, all male. Tenisha stayed late on Wednesday, hoping the office would empty out so she could think. She clicked through the company's internal system, checking the version history of the product roadmap. Her name had been attached to nearly every early innovation, but now version after version had her edits removed, or diluted, credit reattributed. Her digital fingerprints were vanishing. It wasn't just a demotion, it was a digital burial. On Thursday morning, a ping hit her inbox. The subject line was brief: Q4 performance review, adjustment needed. The body of the email was even colder: Please join us in conference room 2B at 11 a.m. HR will be present. There was no context, no courtesy, just a block of corporate ice. Tenisha stared at the screen. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard. But there was nothing to type. What could she say to defend herself against an accusation that hadn't even been spoken yet? She checked her calendar again. A new meeting invite had just appeared. Performance review adjustment. Urgent. The urgency wasn't hers. But the threat definitely was. She got up and walked the halls. The carpet swallowing her footsteps. Every turn reminded her of how visible she used to be in this space. How she had once earned respect here. Not easily, but genuinely. Now every passing employee avoided eye contact like they were afraid they might catch whatever she had. Even her manager, Darren, the one who had once called her the most creative thinker on this floor, now greeted her with a stiff nod and silence. His eyes held something worse than discomfort, self-preservation. As 11-year-old Tenisha sat down in one of the small phone booths, near the windows. The city below buzzed with energy she no longer felt part of. Her reflection in the glass looked older, not in years but in weight. She thought about her younger self, about the version of her who had once dreamed of walking into a company like this and being taken seriously. That girl had believed talent would be enough. That girl had believed in the performance review system as something real, objective. Now she saw it for what it was, a formal excuse for the informal biases that ran this place. The seconds ticked closer to the meeting. She adjusted her blazer, took a breath. She didn't know what they were going to say, but she knew it wouldn't be good. The timing, the tone, the unspoken build-up. It all pointed to a story being written without her voice. But this wasn't just about a review. This was about deletion. Institutional, deliberate deletion. As she walked down the corridor toward conference room 2B, something strange happened. One of the IT contractors, a quiet black man she'd spoken to only once before, passed her in the hallway. He didn't smile, didn't slow down, but as they crossed paths, he said just one thing under his breath, quick and flat like data. Check your access logs. They've been in your files. Tenisha stopped cold. But when she turned to ask what he meant, he was already gone. Her phone vibrated in her pocket. Another calendar update. The meeting title had just changed again. Now it read, HR Escalation Review. Compliance Concern. Tenisha's steps slowed as she neared the frosted glass door marked Human Resources. Her fingers grazed the cool metal handle, her reflection distorted by the blurring pattern of privacy. She already knew nothing good would come from what lay behind it. Not after the invite had shifted from a performance adjustment to a compliance concern. That phrase rang with quiet menace. She took one last breath and stepped inside. The room was pristine, in a way that felt sterile rather than welcoming. It smelled like lemon-scented cleaner and controlled temperature. No family photos, no clutter, just carefully placed succulents, framed mission statements, and the company's diversity pledge on the wall like a shield they could point to in court. At the center of it sat Caroline Reese, the HR director, a woman who wore concern like perfume, noticeable, lingering, artificial. Next to her was Darren, Tenisha's manager, who had once praised her innovation at an all-hands meeting. Now he barely made eye contact. "Hi Tenisha. Come in, please," Caroline said with a professional warmth that bordered on condescending. "This is just a conversation, nothing formal. We want to give you space to speak your truth." Tenisha sat slowly, keeping her posture firm. She scanned the desk for any hint of documents already printed. And there they were. A manila folder, slightly open. The corner of a printout barely peeking out. Her file, already prepared. "We've noticed some recent concerns," Caroline began, her voice even. "Not about your technical skills. Those are undeniable. But more so about how you engage with the team." She smiled again, softer now. "There's been feedback about emotional volatility, resistance to feedback, and moments where collaboration became difficult." Tanisha's brows knit together, but she didn't interrupt. Not yet. Darren finally spoke, his voice lower, almost apologetic. "You're a strong contributor, Tenisha, but we're seeing a pattern of challenges, especially after the holiday event. A few team members felt uncomfortable, said you've been distant, disengaged." Tenisha blinked once, hard. She wanted to laugh. They had cut her out, ghosted her, avoided her, but now they were framing her as the problem. "I've been disengaged," she repeated slowly. "After I was publicly mocked by the CEO during a live-streamed office event." Caroline raised a gentle hand. a gesture of preemptive moderation. We understand that moment may have felt personal, but it wasn't meant to offend. Grant's humor is dry. Tanisha leaned forward. He humiliated me. My idea. And since then, I've been excluded from meetings, stripped from projects, and now you're building a case against me using subjective gossip. Caroline's smile didn't break. There have also been anonymous concerns. One team member mentioned you've been creating a hostile atmosphere. Another said you accused them of bias during a project review. That's not true, Tanisha said, but her voice was calm now, chilled. She had already started detaching. She was watching the play unfold from outside her body. Show me these complaints. Who filed them? We can't disclose names to protect confidentiality, Caroline said, as rehearsed as a voicemail. Tanisha folded her arms. Of course. So we're not having a conversation. This is a soft termination. A performance narrative wrapped in legal padding. Caroline exhaled lightly, acknowledging the unspoken. We're not terminating. Not today. But we are recommending a developmental action plan. 30 days, with weekly check-ins. It's a chance for growth, for realignment. Tanisha's eyes went to Darren. His jaw was clenched. She couldn't tell if it was guilt or discomfort. Maybe both. And if I refuse? Caroline's tone dropped half a note. Still polite. Still polished. Then we'll need to escalate to formal proceedings, which could impact future references, unfortunately. It was a box. A professionally gift-wrapped box, labeled support, lined with quiet threats. Tanisha nodded once, then stood. You've already made your decision. I'll respond in writing. Caroline nodded back, already flipping her folder shut. The performance review had never been the point. It was documentation, ammunition. The real meeting had happened before she even arrived. Tanisha walked out slowly. Her body didn't shake, but her spirit rattled. As she reached her desk, she noticed her computer account had already been restricted. No access to internal documentation, no edit permissions. It was subtle, but unmistakable. They were pulling the plug in slow motion. She sat at her desk, not to work but to absorb. Her coworkers glanced up, then quickly back down. A few whispered. The air felt thick, like something unsaid was stuck in the ceiling tiles. She noticed an intern collecting feedback surveys from desks nearby, but skipped hers entirely. She wasn't just being isolated. She was being quarantined. As she began pulling personal files from her drawer, a wave of clarity settled in. This wasn't about culture fit. This was about containment. They were neutralizing her. The party had revealed a hierarchy not just of roles, but of voices. Who got to joke? Who got to dream? Who got to belong? She packed her favorite pen, a framed photo of her nephew, and a notebook with product sketches that would never see daylight here. Her hands moved automatically, but her mind was tracking everything. The sudden coldness, the silent shifts, the weaponized kindness. This was how corporate racism worked. Not in slurs, not in shouts, but in whispers and paperwork, in access removed, in language coded to sound like help. Just as she zipped her bag, she heard it, laughter from down the hall, near the kitchen. Two senior VPs stood casually, mugs in hand. One of them, a man whose name she only knew because he sat on the product oversight board, leaned in and said, a little too loudly, well, what do they expect? Black girls don't belong in product anyway. It's not Wakanda. The other one laughed, not loudly, but he didn't stop him. He didn't correct. He didn't blink. Tanisha didn't freeze. She didn't gasp. She just stood there, her back to them, her body motionless. And in that silence, a new resolve began to form. Not just anger, but precision. As she turned to leave, her phone buzzed. A new email. Subject line, urgent, internal intellectual property concern, attribution questioned. The file name attached was her Christmas wish sketch. The city outside her window sparkled with holiday cheer, but inside Tanisha's studio apartment, nothing felt bright. The building's radiators sputtered, heating unevenly, just like her emotions, surging one moment, cold the next. She sat wrapped in two sweaters, phone in hand, eyes fixed on job boards she'd already refreshed 3 times that morning. Her inbox stayed silent, save for a couple of automated rejection emails, disguised in cheerful fonts. The words, "We've decided to move forward with other candidates," didn't sting anymore. They felt numb, like background noise. Her apartment was filled with evidence of a life once in motion. Unfinished notebooks, sketches of app interfaces, sticky notes with ideas she had once believed could change the game. Now it all felt like debris from someone else's ambition. The kind of ambition that didn't survive boardrooms where jokes cut deeper than slurs, or where feedback was weaponized by people in blazers smiling as they slid knives between your ribs. Rent was due in 9 days. Her checking account was a breath away from empty. Her pride, once firm like concrete, had begun to crack under the weight of silence and erasure. As the days crept by, she noticed how the world outside continued like nothing had happened. Holiday commercials filled every screen. Smiling interracial families opening matching pajamas. Brands boasting diversity like a badge, while erasing the real people who lived its consequences. Tenisha couldn't look away. Every ad was a lie, a taunt, a mockery of the space she had once believed she could belong to. It wasn't just that she had lost her job, it was that they had taken her voice, reshaped her legacy, and acted as if she had never been there at all. On the third night of scrolling through freelance gigs, her eyes landed on something she hadn't seen in weeks. A balled-up sticky note, jammed between two coffee-stained books. She pulled it out, fingers trembling from both cold and disbelief. It was that note, the one she'd submitted for the holiday party's Christmas wish segment. The one Grant Holloway had read aloud with mockery draped over every syllable. She smoothed it out on the table. The ink was still visible, though faded. A toy line for girls like me. Brown skin, natural hair, real stories, real power. She sat with it, just staring. The memory of their laughter echoed in her ears. But this time, it didn't sting, it ignited. They had laughed not because it was silly, but because they knew it was powerful and dangerous. Representation always is when it threatens control. Tenisha blinked, realization flooding in like dawn. What if the wish wasn't the embarrassment? What if it was the seed? What if what they called unrealistic was actually revolutionary? She rummaged through her drawer and found the sketch pad she hadn't opened in months. Her fingers moved before her mind could catch up. Lines became limbs. Curves became curls. She drew a doll. No, not just a doll, but a girl. With deep brown skin, a wide nose, and tight coils unapologetically standing up from her head like a crown. She gave her boots instead of heels, a lab coat over jeans, and a tool belt instead of a purse. Tenisha didn't just design a toy, she designed the version of herself that had never existed on toy shelves. She stayed up through the night, sketching, designing, naming. She called her Maya, after Maya Angelou, because she needed the spirit of someone who had survived being silenced. Maya had friends, Zora, Langston, Simone, each doll inspired by Black icons, but reimagined as girls building futures. She designed their packaging to include mini bios, QR codes, linking to stories of real Black pioneers, and journals where wearers could write their own dreams. It wasn't just a toy, it was a rebellion, wrapped in plastic. At 3:17 a.m., with a half-empty mug of cocoa beside her and heart pounding like a drumline, Tenisha took a photo of her sketches and opened TikTok. Her hands hovered over the post button. Doubt whispered in her ear, "You're jobless, they'll think you're desperate." But louder than that was something else. The sound of the VP's laughter, the HR director's smirk, the CEO's chuckle. That noise gave her permission. She recorded a 30-second voiceover. "A few weeks ago, I was fired after my Christmas wish was laughed at in front of my entire company. I said I wanted to build dolls that looked like real Black girls. They said it wasn't marketable. So here's what I drew anyway." For every kid who's never seen themselves on a toy shelf, she added the hashtag #representation matters and hit She didn't expect anything. Not really. Maybe a few likes from mutuals. Maybe a kind comment or two. But when she woke up 5 hours later, her phone was lit up like Times Square. Notifications streamed in like floodwaters. Duets, stitches, shares. Her video had hit 12,000 likes overnight. Hundreds of comments from parents, teachers, and young girls, saying things like, "I would have loved this growing up," or "I'd buy 10 right now." One user wrote, "Tag Mattel because they need to see this." Another, "This is revolutionary. Where can I pre-order?" Tenisha stared at the screen, heart pounding. This wasn't pity. It wasn't performative solidarity. This was something different, something real. They weren't just validating her. They were demanding more. A movement had begun, and she was at its center. As she scrolled through the comments, one stood out in bold. It was a private message request from a user, with no profile photo. The message read, "You need to protect your idea. They're already trying to steal it again. Check who viewed your LinkedIn." Tenisha hadn't slept. Not really. She drifted off around dawn with the phone still in her hand, only to jolt awake an hour later to the relentless vibration of new notifications. She blinked against the morning light, barely processing the numbers on her screen. Her video wasn't just doing well, it had exploded. Over 90,000 views, tens of thousands of likes. Her inbox was a wildfire. Emails from journalists, influencers, moms, educators, former classmates who suddenly remembered her brilliance. Everyone had something to say now. Everyone wanted to be a part of her moment. But it didn't feel like her moment yet. It still felt like the smoke before a fire fully caught. She scrolled through the comments, each one another drop of validation she had never received in the 4 years she gave to that company. My daughter's eyes lit up when she saw this, one mom wrote. Why does this not exist yet? Said another. And then, they laughed at this? Disgusting. I hope she sues. Tanisha's hands trembled as she sipped cold coffee and tried to steady herself. There were links being shared to articles about diversity in toys, interviews with child psychologists about racial identity in early development, and even an old TED Talk she'd forgotten she had once bookmarked. People weren't just responding, they were rallying. She had tapped into something raw, something generational. But for every 10 people lifting her up, there was one trying to tear her down. The trolls had arrived too. Predictably. Surgically. This is race-baiting garbage. Another woke scam. You got fired because you sucked, not because you're black. The words stung more than she wanted to admit. Her block list grew faster than she could manage, and yet she kept scrolling, not because she craved the praise or feared the hate, but because she was waiting for the other shoe to drop. Something in her gut told her this wasn't just viral, it was dangerous. The message came in around noon. It was short, anonymous. A burner account with no followers, no posts, just a DM. They're planning to launch your idea without you. No greeting, no explanation, just the truth, stripped to bone. Tanisha froze. Her stomach dropped so suddenly it felt like the floor had vanished beneath her. She reread the message 3 times. The words didn't change. Her mind raced. Was this someone messing with her? A troll? But no troll would have phrased it like that. Not launch. That was corporate speak. Strategic speak. The kind of language used in pitch meetings, product briefs, press releases. Her skin prickled. She pulled up her LinkedIn and checked her profile views. 5 anonymous hits in the past 24 hours. 2 were private browsing from her city. 1 was clearly from a journalist she had spoken to earlier that morning. But the other 2 hidden, silent, untraceable, or suspect. And that's when it clicked. She searched the company's product page. Nothing new posted publicly. Yet. But in the tech space, stealth meant everything. Companies didn't announce they leaked. They seeded buzz. They beta tested internally until launch day came with a polished bow and pre-approved headlines. The kind of launch that erased origin stories. The kind that left black women like her on the cutting room floor. Tanisha's breathing grew shallow. She needed more. Proof. Context. She opened her inbox and typed a quick message to a former coworker, who had always been friendly but kept his head down. Hey. Random question. Have you heard anything about a new product concept being pushed since I left? No reply. She tried another Simone, a junior designer who had once cried in the bathroom after being ignored in a meeting and whom Tanisha had comforted. Simone. Please. I think they're using my idea. You don't have to say much. Just blink twice. Still nothing. Hours passed. The excitement of the morning soured into anxiety. Every time she looked at her phone, she saw her own face on Twitter threads, Instagram stories, even a Reddit post titled, "This woman got fired for dreaming too big. Now she's making history." They were calling her a hero, an innovator, a visionary, but they didn't know what she was feeling behind the scenes. The looming sense that the story wasn't hers anymore, that it was being stolen in real time, under the banner of redemption. That evening, an email arrived. Subject, media inquiry, clarification needed, regarding originality of toy concept. The sender was from a PR agency. Inside was a carefully worded paragraph that chilled her blood. We are reaching out to verify claims regarding the origin of the toy concept featured in your viral TikTok post. Our client has recently announced a diversity-focused toy line, with strikingly similar visual and thematic elements. They assert the idea has been in development for several months, and would like to avoid any confusion in upcoming press coverage. Tanisha felt like she'd been slapped. It wasn't a denial. It wasn't a cease and desist. It was worse. It was a warning shot. They were laying legal groundwork, gaslighting the timeline, pretending she had copied them. She laughed, sharp, joyless, defense. It was the same company that erased her, humiliated her, and kicked her out. Now they were trying to rewrite her again. But this time she wasn't walking away quietly. She took screenshots. Every post, every message. She forwarded the PR email to herself, to a lawyer friend she barely knew, to her mother just in case. Her fight-or-flight instincts had always leaned toward survival. But this time, something shifted. She was no longer interested in surviving. She wanted justice. Just as she started drafting a public response, her phone lit up with a FaceTime call from an unknown number. When she answered, the face staring back was a former colleague, eyes darting nervously, whispering, "You didn't hear this from me, but your sketches are in the internal pitch deck. They're presenting it to investors tomorrow morning." The FaceTime call ended as abruptly as it had started, leaving Tenisha staring at her reflection in the black screen, heart hammering against her ribs like it was trying to escape. Her former colleague's whispered warning echoed in her mind. "Your sketches are in the pitch deck." She stood up without realizing it, hands trembling as she paced her small apartment. The heat wasn't working again, but her body was burning from the inside out. Her drawings, her characters, repackaged and pitched as innovation by the very company that discarded her like a broken cog. It wasn't just disrespect, it was theft, surgical, sanitized behind boardroom doors. The kind of theft that wouldn't leave fingerprints, because the perpetrators wore suits, and called it strategy. She turned toward her laptop and opened LinkedIn. Her former employer's company page was buzzing with new posts. Smiling photos of Grant Holloway shaking hands with investors, banners of diversity and innovation, flashing across their homepage. There, right beneath the announcement of a game-changing new toy initiative, was a promotional caption, inspired by a vision of inclusion. Our CEO leads a bold step into representation-focused products for the next generation. Tenisha nearly choked on the air in her lungs. She clicked the link. It redirected her to a press kit, a downloadable PDF press release, a polished, vibrant media kit with carefully worded language about inclusion and market disruption. Phrases like closing the representation gap and inspired leadership littered the page like confetti at a victory parade. The product? A doll line. Brown-skinned, natural-haired girls in empowering roles. Sound familiar? It was her idea. Her entire pitch, lifted from her TikTok video, only flattened, stripped and sterilized for corporate digestion. The characters had been renamed. Maya was now Nova. Langston had become Leo. But the outfits were eerily familiar. A doll with a lab coat and a tool belt. Another in an astronaut jumpsuit. The packaging looked upgraded, but she could trace every contour back to the sketches she had made at 3 a.m., heartbroken and hungry to matter. But there was no mention of Tenisha, not a footnote, not a reference, not even a half-hearted acknowledgement of inspiration from online creators. The entire origin story had been scrubbed, rewritten, and handed to a man who had once laughed at the very idea of toys like these being viable. Rage pushed her out of her chair. She grabbed her phone and texted the former colleague who'd called. "Do you have access to the actual pitch deck?" 3 dots pulsed on the screen. Then a reply. "Only for a minute. Sending screenshots. Don't tell anyone." Moments later, images began arriving, grainy but clear enough, slide after slide. One labeled, Product Genesis, described the idea as sparked by an internal conversation about social impact during the holiday season. Another showed digital renders of dolls that mirrored Tenisha's sketches almost identically. And there it was. Slide 9. Inspirational Leadership, Grant Holloway. A photo of the CEO beaming next to a quote, "When we think big, we can reshape the world for every child." Tenisha stared, hands clenched. It wasn't just that they stole from her, it was that they buried the pain it came from. Took her humiliation, her exclusion, and repackaged it as a success story for a man who never believed in her. For a moment her vision blurred. She sat down again, staring into nothing. She had choices to make. She could go public with this, start a war on social media, risk everything, or she could leak it quietly, strategically, let the truth out without making herself the immediate target. Her phone buzzed again. This time it was a message from a name she hadn't seen in a while. Usha Rollins, a tech journalist for Black Tech Voice, an outlet focused on race, innovation, and accountability. Usha had followed her TikTok video the day it went viral and left a comment. "This is genius. If you ever want your story told properly, I got you." Tenisha had ignored it then. unsure of what her next move would be. But now she knew exactly what she needed to do. She opened a secure email tab, attached the screenshots of the deck, along with a brief anonymous note. This is being pitched tomorrow. The creator behind this concept was fired from the company weeks ago, after her idea was publicly mocked. These designs are hers. She has the originals. She's being erased. Do what you will. A friend. She hit send. Then she shut her laptop, walked to the window, and stared down at the city below. It was strange how calm she suddenly felt. Not triumphant, not vindicated, but clear. The truth was no longer locked in their offices. It had wings now. Later that night, while she scrolled through TikTok comments again, her phone buzzed once more. Asha had replied, just 2 words, got it. And then, a few minutes later, another message came through. This one from someone she hadn't expected. Caroline Reese, the HR director, who'd once sat across from her with a performative smile and a folder full of warnings. Her message read, Tanisha, can we talk? This is urgent. You might be in danger. As Tanisha opened the message, a new alert popped up from her cloud storage. Someone was trying to access her original toy sketches. Files marked confidential were being remotely downloaded from an IP address registered to her former employer. The morning the article dropped, Tanisha woke up to a phone vibrating so hard it nearly slid off the nightstand. Her notifications were overflowing. Texts, Twitter tags, emails flagged urgent. She hadn't even reached for her glasses yet, but something told her the moment had arrived. The article had gone live. She opened her phone and stared at the screen, breath held tight in her chest. Black woman's toy concept stolen by former employer. After public humiliation. That was the headline. Bold, unflinching. The lead photo was a split screen, Tanisha's original sketch, side by side with the corporate render they'd tried to pass off as their own. It was undeniable. The resemblance was blatant. Below the image, the subhead cut deeper. Fired weeks after submitting a mocked Christmas wish, Tenisha Moore's idea now fuels a company's new diversity initiative. The piece, written by Asha Rollins of Black Tech Voice, didn't mince words. It laid out everything. The holiday party mockery, the HR performance trap, the pitch deck theft, the anonymous whistleblower. Asha had done her homework. She'd verified the timelines, interviewed multiple sources who confirmed Tanisha had pitched the concept first. She even pulled screenshots from internal Slack messages, referencing that doll thing Tanisha talked about, weeks before the company claimed its development began. No names were spared. The article named Grant Holloway directly, named the company, named the lie. By noon, the piece had spread like wildfire. Twitter threads dissected every paragraph. TikTok creators duetted Tanisha's original post with tears in their eyes. Hashtags like "Justice for Tanisha" and "Give her credit" trended within hours. Even celebrities started sharing the story. A Grammy-winning singer reposted the article, captioning it, "Black brilliance is not yours to exploit." Within minutes it had 1 million likes. Tanisha watched it unfold in real time, still in her robe, clutching her mug like a lifeline. It felt surreal, like watching someone else live the moment she had dreamed of and feared for weeks. Her name was everywhere, not buried in a footnote, not erased in a boardroom. Everywhere. But with visibility came scrutiny. The trolls returned, louder, angrier, now with talking points. She should be thankful they're even using her idea. She's playing the race card for clout. This is just another woke lie. She blocked, muted, and kept scrolling. And then came the flood, her DMs filled with stories. Dozens, then hundreds of other Black professionals who had been silenced, overlooked, gaslit. Former employees of her old company came forward too, anonymously at first. Some dropped receipts. Others went public. One woman, a UX designer, shared how her accessibility features had been stripped from a product release and rebranded as a new innovation by a white male exec. Another, a junior engineer, described a similar HR trap. Warnings, write-ups, quiet termination. The narrative shifted from a single theft to an entire pattern. The article didn't just expose one injustice, it opened the gates. People weren't just outraged, they were mobilized. Calls for accountability rang out across every platform. People began tagging the company's partners, demanding statements. Consumers threatened boycotts. Investors started pulling away. PR fires sparked everywhere. The brand tried to post. And in the middle of it all stood Tanisha, no longer invisible. That afternoon, TechBuzz Weekly, a mainstream business outlet, published a follow-up. Is corporate America finally facing its reckoning on black innovation? The article credited Tenisha's story as the catalyst. They called her a quiet disruptor. She didn't feel quiet, she felt exposed, and yet, a strange calm had begun to settle in her bones. She had told the truth, not perfectly, not strategically, but completely, and the world had finally listened. She took a deep breath and looked out her window. The same city she had once felt swallowed by now felt different, like it was watching her, waiting to see what she would do next. And then came the message. It arrived through LinkedIn, of all places. A name she didn't recognize. Samuel Klein, venture partner at Harbor Spring Ventures, one of the largest early-stage investors in consumer products. His bio listed brands she'd seen on shelves her whole life. He had never liked any of her posts, never commented. But his message was direct and unnervingly casual. Tenisha, I read the article. The story is heartbreaking and familiar. I'd like to talk about your concept, not the stolen version, the real one. Let's talk funding. Let's talk making this real, on your terms. Her hand froze over the keyboard. She reread it twice. Funding. Not pity, not exposure, not content. Capital. The kind of opportunity that had always gone to someone else. Now it was being offered to her. Not because she asked, but because she couldn't be ignored. Still, her mind raced. What was real? What was bait? Was this genuine interest, or another attempt to co-opt her work? Had he read the deck before the article? Had they pitched him her idea under another name? Tenisha typed a careful response. She thanked him, asked for details, requested a call. She attached her deck, her real one, time-stamped, watermarked, bulletproof. If they wanted to talk investment, they'd be negotiating with her now. But just as she hit send, her phone buzzed again. This time it wasn't a stranger. It was Simone, the junior designer from her old team, the one who had stayed silent until now. Her message was brief. I know you've seen the article, but there's something you still don't know. Grant didn't just steal your toy. He's already pitched it as his startup to a private VC. He's trying to spin it as his idea post-resignation. He plans to exit with it. I have the documents. Tell me where to send them. As Tenisha dropped her phone in shock, her inbox pinged again. A legal email. Subject line. Cease and desist. Defamatory claims regarding proprietary concepts. Her former company had just declared legal war. The cease and desist letter sat at the top of Tenisha's inbox like a digital slap. Bold font. Law firm logo. Subject line. Notice of IP. Infringement. Unauthorized use of proprietary concept. Even before opening it, she understood what it meant. The company that erased her now claimed ownership of the idea she birthed from pain. It was a final insult, wrapped in legalese. A threat disguised as formality. But something in her had shifted. Fear used to paralyze her. Now it just made her sharper. She forwarded the letter to a black woman attorney she'd been introduced to through a social media contact. Her name was Camille Banks. And in her first call, she didn't mince words. They're bluffing. They know they stole it. This is meant to scare you into silence. Camille had seen it before, the corporate strategy of smothering creators in legal fog until they backed down or went broke. They can't prove first use because we have first use. Time-stamped sketches, public documentation. That article? It's your shield. Still, the process wasn't smooth. Tenisha had the truth, but truth didn't pay invoices. She needed infrastructure. She needed a company. The message from investor Samuel Klein had opened a door, and she stepped through it cautiously but with purpose. Their first Zoom call was stiff, but honest. Klein didn't try to play savior. He listened. This is yours. We're not here to own it, he said. We're here to help you scale it. You call the shots. With Klein's seed funding secured and legal protection underway, Tenisha officially launched her startup, True You Toys, a brand built not on plastic smiles or surface-level slogans, but on truth. She registered the LLC, opened a business account, filed trademarks. Every step forward felt like digging herself out of a grave she never should have been shoved into. But money didn't erase the trauma. Nor did it come with instructions. There was no corporate guidebook for building a company while fielding legal threats and healing from public humiliation. Some days she couldn't even focus. Flashbacks of the party. The laughter, the internal emails flooded her mind. On those days she worked from the floor, laptop open, back against the wall, crying between emails. She let herself feel it, but never let it stop her. She posted a video announcement to her followers. I'm starting something real. Not for revenge, for legacy. The video reached 500,000 views. Comments poured in. Parents wanted updates. Teachers offered to pilot test the dolls in classrooms. Black artists sent fan art, wanting to contribute. One comment read, "We've waited decades for this. Whatever you build, we'll be there." Tenisha started assembling a team, not based on resumes, but resonance. She found an illustrator from Atlanta who'd been sketching black mermaids since high school, a writer from Detroit who specialized in culturally rooted children's stories, a packaging designer from New Orleans who had grown up never seeing her own skin tone on shelves. Together they shaped the foundation of True You Toys, each person bringing a piece of themselves into the project. They worked out of shared Google Docs and late-night Zooms. The first product line took shape. The True You collection. 4 dolls, each with backstories rooted in real-world brilliance. Maya, the inventor. Simone, the space enthusiast. Zuri, the future mayor. Harper, the eco-activist. Each doll would come with a mini storybook, activity cards, and an affirmation mirror. Representation wasn't an accessory, it was the mission. But obstacles stalked every step. Manufacturers were hesitant. One emailed back, "Love the concept, but we're unsure if there's a viable market for niche cultural products." Another tried to steer her toward lighter skin tones for broader appeal. Tenisha ignored them all. She found a woman-owned factory, overseas, willing to prototype the designs without compromising the vision. They sent back samples that brought her to tears. Brown skin, coily hair, fierce eyes. She held the first Maya doll in her hands like it was an apology the world had finally sent, 20 years too late. But still, pre-orders opened in the second week of February. The site crashed within 4 hours. Tenisha stared at her screen as orders poured in. Hundreds, then thousands. Parents shared screenshots on Instagram. Kids recorded reaction videos, screaming, "She looks like me." People weren't just buying a product, they were investing in a restoration. But behind the scenes, the pushback sharpened. The same day she hit 10,000 units, Camille emailed her with an attachment, a second cease and desist letter. This one more aggressive, filled with intimidating citations and vague threats of injunctions and damages. The company now claimed Tenisha had accessed internal files illegally, that the designs were developed on company time and thus belonged to them. It was baseless, but dangerous if left unanswered. Camille responded with fire. "Your client is attempting to enforce ownership over work created outside of employment scope, using data trails that do not exist. Any further intimidation will be deemed retaliation and publicly documented." She CC'd the firm's partner. Tenisha read the email twice and whispered, "Thank you," even though she was alone. The legal heat didn't stop there. Former colleagues began receiving subtle pressure to retract their support. Simone messaged her, "They offered me a raise if I deleted my tweets." Others went silent altogether, too afraid to lose their jobs. A quiet exodus of truth-tellers. It hurt, but Tenisha understood. That's how systems protect themselves, through quiet deals and louder fear. Still, she kept going. She hired a PR firm, black-owned, small but fierce, to handle media. They shaped her message into a movement. True, You wasn't just toys, it was reclamation. A world where black girls didn't have to wait until adulthood to feel powerful. A brand born from trauma. Yes, but not stuck in it. Tenisha made sure of that. Every pitch deck, every interview, every product decision circled back to the same question. Would the little girl I used to be feel seen by this? If the answer wasn't yes, it didn't make the cut. Then came the partnership requests. Big box retailers emailed. Influencers wanted in. Talk shows invited her. She said no to all of them. Not yet. We grow at our own pace, she told her team. We're not selling a moment. We're building a home. But the legal threats kept creeping closer. Camille warned her they might try to file for an emergency injunction. Stop production before shipping. They're scared, Camille said. They think you're not just making noise. You're taking market share. Tenisha sat in her office that night, surrounded by doll prototypes, hand-drawn storyboards, and packaging mock-ups with real black girls on the front. She had fought for every inch of this ground, built it from grief, and now the same people who once told her this idea wasn't viable were trying to sue her for having it first. The next morning, a certified letter arrived by courier. She signed for it without flinching. She opened it slowly, expecting another cease and desist. But inside was something else entirely, a formal lawsuit, filed in federal court. Her old company was suing her for unauthorized commercial use of proprietary material and demanding $2.5 million in damages. The courthouse didn't feel like a place of justice. It felt like theater, cold, orderly, and unforgiving. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, and the smell of stale coffee lingered in the halls. Tenisha sat on a hard wooden bench outside the courtroom, dressed in a charcoal gray suit she couldn't afford but needed to wear. Her palms were damp, her knees rigid. She wasn't afraid of telling the truth. She was afraid of how easily the truth could be buried beneath the weight of power, perception, and perfectly framed lies. Her attorney, Camille, leaned in with quiet urgency. They're pulling everything. Fake timelines, altered email threads. They're trying to make it look like you reverse engineered them. Tanisha blinked, swallowing the rising bile in her throat. How? How did they even get away with this? Camille's jaw tightened. Because they know the system better, and they've paid to rig it. Inside the courtroom, the company's legal team looked like they'd been cut from marble, impeccably dressed, voices measured, eyes calculating. They spoke in sanitized language. Alleged overlap, coincidental similarities, no documented ownership. Their lead attorney, Preston Vance, delivered his arguments like TED Talks, charming the jury with every misdirection. He presented a printed email chain, supposedly dated months before Tanisha's viral sketch, where Grant Holloway allegedly mentioned expanding into inclusive dolls. The room nodded. The judge didn't blink. Camille stood to object, but the damage had already been done. Tanisha wanted to scream. That email was a lie. She had never seen it, never been copied on it, never even heard the internal project title they'd suddenly introduced, Project Harmony, a phrase that sounded inclusive enough to sell but sterile enough to bury any connection to her original pitch. On cross-examination, Camille tried to poke holes. She showed time-stamped images from Tanisha's iPad, the TikTok post, the whistleblower screenshots. But their lawyers were prepared. Sketches on a personal device don't equal formal IP development, Vance said. There was no NDA signed, no pitch deck submitted to company systems, no supervisor approval. Therefore, it cannot be considered protected material. Each sentence chipped away at Tanisha's story like a sculptor removing detail from a once beautiful face. Then came the company's star witness, Laura Marks, a former product manager. Tanisha knew her, worked with her. Laura had smiled in meetings, complimented her work, and now she sat in the witness chair, calmly stating under oath that Tanisha never submitted a formal idea related to toy development, and often had emotional reactions to feedback. That last part made Tanisha's stomach lurch. It wasn't just a lie. It was coded violence. Emotional was the corporate world's favorite way to discredit black women, undermining our rationality, while preserving their civility. Camille stood slowly, her voice sharper now. Ms. Marks, were you in the holiday meeting where Ms. Moore's idea was publicly mocked by the CEO? Laura hesitated. Yes. And did you find the CEO's comments appropriate? Laura's eyes flicked to the company bench, then back to the judge. It was meant as humor. No harm was intended. The courtroom absorbed the lie in silence. Tanisha's eyes burned, but she didn't cry. She couldn't. Not here. Not in front of them. The jury watched her closely. Not as a creator. Not even as a victim. As a spectacle. They weren't judging the truth. They were judging her. The trial dragged into its third day, and momentum had shifted against her. Headlines outside painted the case as murky and complex. Some platforms called it a cautionary tale for content creators. The narrative was slipping, and then, just when the gavel felt inches from ending it all, the courtroom door opened. A figure stepped in, unexpected, nervous, clutching a small manila folder like a life raft. It was Jason, a former mid-level strategist Tanisha hadn't seen in over a year. His eyes darted toward hers for only a second, before focusing on the judge. Your Honor, Camille said, rising. We have a new witness who has come forward voluntarily. The opposing counsel stood in protest, but the judge allowed it barely. Jason took the stand. His voice was shaky, but he didn't stutter. I worked directly under Grant Holloway. I was in the internal strategy meeting, the week after the holiday party. I recorded part of the session because I was disturbed. Camille's eyes lit up. You have a recording? Jason nodded. Yes. He opened the folder. Inside was a flash drive. The courtroom went still. The judge allowed it to be played. A shaky audio file began, crackling with background noise. And then, unmistakably, Grant's voice filled the courtroom. Yeah, she actually submitted that idea. Cute. She wanted little black dolls with quotes from Maya Angelou or something. We all laughed, but honestly, it could sell if we clean it up. Toss her name. Make it social impact. Slap my signature on it. People eat that stuff up. The room froze, not a breath. Not a whisper. Just the sound of Grant Holloway, in his own voice, admitting the theft. Smug. Confident. Weaponizing her dream like it was a joke with profit margins. The jury turned, slowly, almost in unison, toward Tenisha. She didn't smile. She didn't need to. The truth had finally spoken. That night, as the audio clip went viral, and her case shifted overnight, Tenisha opened her inbox to find a message she never expected. We'd like to invite you to keynote the Global Tech Conference. Topic: Reclaiming Innovation. The morning after the courtroom recording dropped, the world no longer saw Tenisha Moore as just a name in a legal battle. She had become the face of a movement. The audio clip, Grant Holloway's voice dripping with smugness, laughing as he spoke of tossing her name and slapping his signature on it, swept through every corner of the internet like wildfire. It wasn't speculation anymore. It was proof. Real. Undeniable. Devastating. Clips of the recording flooded timelines. Podcasts dissected every second of it. Evening news anchors played it side by side with images of Tenisha's dolls. This is what corporate theft sounds like. One outlet wrote. Another called it the racial reckoning Silicon Valley never saw coming. By noon, a trending tweet read, "From mockery to $1 million lawsuit, Tenisha Moore is who they tried to erase and failed." Outside the headquarters of her former employer, protests erupted. Former employees, parents, activists. They stood shoulder to shoulder, holding signs that said, "Give her credit," and "Black ideas matter." One little girl held up a Maya doll with a handwritten note taped to it. "Thank you, Miss Tenisha." Camera zoomed in on her face. It went viral instantly. The company tried to contain the fallout. Press statements were rushed out. Vague apologies, empty buzzwords, pledges to reevaluate internal systems. But the damage was already done. 3 of their sponsors pulled out within 48 hours. The company's stock tumbled. Investors panicked. Grant Holloway officially stepped down, though insiders leaked that he'd been forced out. Still, he walked away with a multi-million-dollar severance, a final insult that didn't go unnoticed. Tenisha stayed quiet publicly. No interviews. No grand statements. Not yet. She watched from her apartment as the world digested what she'd known all along. That truth only matters when it's packaged in pain. People can consume. She had given them the pain. Now they wanted her voice. Meanwhile, the GoFundMe Camille had quietly set up for legal fees had exploded. What started as a modest $25,000 goal surpassed $1 million within 3 days. Strangers flooded it with messages. "This is for my daughter. This is for every idea I buried. This is for the version of me that didn't fight back." Tenisha read them all, heart heavy with gratitude and grief. She hadn't asked to become a symbol, but now that she was one, she wasn't letting go of the mic. That Thursday, while sipping tea in sweatpants stained with ink and packaging labels, she received the email. Subject line, "Invitation to speak, Global Tech Conference." She read it 3 times before setting the mug down. 2 years ago, she'd applied to that same conference, not for a speaking slot, just to attend. She had pitched herself as a rising voice in product development, sent samples, attached her resume. She had been ghosted, without explanation. Now they were inviting her to keynote. Tenisha blinked at the screen. The irony didn't escape her. The same stage that once deemed her unworthy now saw her as essential. But this time she wouldn't be walking in with a badge clipped to borrowed credentials. She'd be walking in with truth clenched in both fists. Camille, reading over her shoulder, raised an eyebrow. "You want to do it?" Tenisha thought for a long moment. "I think I have to." She accepted. Preparations began immediately. The PR team she'd hired moved swiftly, shaping the moment with precision. The conference organizers offered full creative control. "We want you to tell your story," they said. Tenisha responded without hesitation. "I'm not telling a story. I'm telling the story. And not just mine." Still, doubt crept in at night. What if the world's attention moved on before she took the stage? What if the industry tried to reframe her as just the girl who went viral, reducing her battle to a footnote? But every time that fear rose, something new landed in her inbox. An educator requesting classroom packs of True You dolls. A parent thanking her for giving their child visibility. A young developer saying, "I started coding again because of you." She wasn't just building a brand. She was rebuilding belief in herself, and in every overlooked voice that had ever been deemed too niche to matter. And yet something darker stirred beneath the surface. Buried in the wave of press attention was a subtle narrative shift. Op-eds that questioned whether her case would open the floodgates for others to claim ownership of corporate ideas. Quiet murmurs from tech insiders, warning about IP chaos and brand risk. The old guard was regrouping, not publicly, not loudly, but Tenisha could feel it. The systems she had exposed were wounded, but not dead. One night, she received a message from an anonymous burner email. The subject line chilled her. "They're not done. Watch your back." There was no body text, no attachments, just those 7 words. Tenisha stared at it for a long time. Then she deleted it. Not out of fear, but focus. If they wanted to watch her, so be it. Because this time, the world was watching them. On the eve of her keynote, as Tenisha rehearsed her speech, her assistant burst into the room, holding a tablet. "You need to see this." On screen was a breaking headline. Leaked footage. Former CEO plans shadow startup with True clone, backed by new investor. The stage lights were searing, but Tenisha stood tall beneath them. Her heels anchored her to the floor, but her spirit felt light, like something finally ready to be released. Behind her, a massive screen displayed her name in bold white text. Tenisha Moore, founder of True Toys. Beneath it, the subtitle read, "Reclaiming Innovation, Reclaiming Ourselves." The auditorium was packed, wall to wall, industry leaders, tech visionaries, product developers, college students, reporters, all watching, all waiting. Some had doubted her, some had dismissed her, but they were all here now. Just 2 years ago, she had applied to volunteer at this very conference, hoping for a chance to shadow the product panels. They had never responded. Now she was headlining. The irony tasted like steel on her tongue. Cold, earned, and undeniable. She adjusted the microphone. The applause had already thundered when she walked out, but silence fell as she began to speak. "I wasn't supposed to be here," she said, voice steady. "Not according to them." She paused. "They told me I didn't fit the culture, that I was difficult, that my ideas were unrealistic. They called me emotional, uncooperative. They mocked my dream. Not behind closed doors, publicly. On camera. On company time. No slides. No fancy visuals. Just her." And then she continued. "They stole that dream. Repackaged it. Whitewashed it. Called it theirs. And when I pushed back, they sued me for creating something they never believed in, until they saw how profitable it could be." Gasps rose from the crowd. She saw heads nodding, eyes widening. The truth had never been so raw in a space so curated. This was where diversity was usually referenced in percentages, not pain. "But I didn't come here today to retell my trauma," Tenisha said. "I came to show you what they tried to bury." She turned to the side of the stage, where her team, her real team, waited with something cradled in their arms. They handed it to her carefully. She held it like glass. And then slowly, she revealed it to the audience. The first official production model of the Maya doll. Gasps turned to tears. The doll was everything Tenisha had imagined in the early hours of that hopeless night. Brown skin, full lips, natural coils tucked beneath a lab cap, a tiny clipboard in one hand, a blueprint rolled in the other. Her name embroidered across her mini lab coat, shimmered under the lights. "Maya." "I didn't build this to make a point," Tenisha said. "I built this because I spent years in rooms that refused to see girls like her as valuable. I built this because I was tired of watching our stories be erased and resold to us. I built this so the next black girl with a crazy idea wouldn't have to fight this hard to be heard." Applause erupted. But she wasn't finished. "And to the companies who like to use words like inclusion and representation while silencing voices behind the curtain, let this be a warning. We see you, we hear you, and we're documenting everything." Her voice didn't shake. Not once. Tenisha took a deep breath as she prepared to close. Heart full, but jaw clenched. She was about to say her final line when something caught her eye in the front row. A small girl, maybe 8 or 9, sitting with her mother. Tight curls, wide eyes, holding something in her lap. Not the Maya doll, but a handcrafted version of it, made from fabric and buttons. The proportions were off, the stitching uneven, but it was unmistakably her. The girl stood, hesitant, eyes glossy with tears. She lifted the doll above her head, her voice cracking as she whispered just loud enough to reach the mic. "That's me." The auditorium fell silent again. Not the kind of silence that waits, but the kind that listens. Tanisha's chest tightened. Her throat clenched. She blinked quickly, then walked down from the stage toward the girl. She knelt and took the handmade doll gently from her hands. The girl's fingers trembled. Her mother, weeping now, mouthed the words, "Thank you." Tanisha stood, holding both the real and the handmade doll, and returned to the microphone. "This is why we don't stop." The room erupted. No longer just applause, but a standing ovation that rattled the rafters. It wasn't just for her. It was for every story buried, every sketch dismissed, every voice that had been told, "You don't belong here." Backstage, her phone buzzed nonstop. Reporters requesting interviews, publications updating their headlines. But one message stopped her mid-step. A name she hadn't seen since her termination. Darren Mays, her old manager. The message was short. "I need to come clean. They're planning to launch a competing brand overseas, with your original prototypes. It's bigger than you think. I kept files. Let's talk before it's too late." Tanisha stared at the screen, pulse racing. Before she could reply, her lawyer called in, her voice sharp, urgent. "We just found something buried in the lawsuit discovery files. You need to see it now. It changes everything." The first snow of December fell like a silent celebration. The streets were dressed in light. The storefronts glowed with red and gold. And inside homes across America, something new was happening. Something that had never existed before. Little black girls were unwrapping holiday gifts, and for the first time in their lives, pulling dolls from boxes that looked like them. The first wave of True You toys hit the shelves on December 1st. By December 4th, they were gone. Sold out. Nationwide. Tanisha sat in her small but now bustling office, staring at the numbers on the dashboard. She refreshed the back end again just to make sure. Inventory. 0. Back orders were flooding in. Her head spun. Weeks ago, she'd been unsure if she'd even meet her production quota. Now demand was surging beyond anything she imagined. They weren't just buying a product, they were buying a correction, a reparation, a reflection of self long overdue. Her team was overwhelmed, but in the best way. The warehouse in Jersey worked double shifts. Her email overflowed with testimonials. One message read, "My daughter cried when she saw Maya. She said, 'Mommy, she has my hair. I've never seen her this confident.'" Another came with a video of a birthday girl yelling, "She's a scientist like me," before hugging the doll to her chest. These weren't just toys. They were tools of healing. Reclamation in vinyl and fabric. The media caught on quickly. News anchors aired montages of holiday unboxings, showing brown hands cradling brown dolls. Influencers uploaded reaction videos. Educators posted lesson plans using the dolls to spark discussions about representation and history. Oprah's team reached out. Time magazine requested an interview. Stores that once turned her away now begged for restock priority. Tanisha, for the first time in months, allowed herself to breathe. The lawsuits hadn't disappeared, but momentum was clearly on her side. Camille, sharp as ever, was already negotiating a counterclaim. Discovery files had uncovered something stunning. Early internal documents with timestamps proving that the company used her original designs before ever initiating their so-called diversity initiative. And the cherry on top, a contract drafted by the CEO's assistant with her name redacted, a failed attempt to retroactively give Grant ownership of the idea, just weeks after the holiday party. The paper trail was dirty. But now, it was also public. None of it slowed the orders. If anything, the controversy fueled the mission. Tanisha used the spike in attention to double down on her message. She launched a campaign called Look Like Me, a social movement encouraging families to share stories about how representation had shaped their children's lives. The hashtag trended within hours. She hired more staff, expanded the line, started testing boy dolls. The Simone astronaut sold out faster than even Maya. True You wasn't just a brand anymore. It was a cultural correction. It was what every other company had claimed to be, but failed to live up to. She hadn't just disrupted the market. She had redefined what was possible. But even in triumph, her mind stayed tethered to where it all started. That cold conference room, the mocking laughter, the quiet shame. She carried those memories like scars, visible only when the lights dimmed. Every success felt like revenge. Yes, but also like restoration. A soft rebellion wrapped in joy. Tanisha didn't gloat. She didn't need to. The numbers spoke for themselves. $1 million in sales in under a week. Features in Forbes. The Cut and Fast Company. Parents asking when the next batch would arrive. Children drawing their own versions of the dolls. True, you had cracked something open. And now the world was watching. Not in sympathy, but in admiration. Late one night after the final shipment of the season had been confirmed, Tenisha sat at her desk alone. The team had gone home. The office was quiet. She sipped lukewarm cider and stared out the window, watching snow fall against a city that once tried to swallow her whole. Her inbox buzzed, but she ignored it at first. Then she saw the subject line: Netflix original pitch, based on true events. Her heart skipped. The email was short, but it hit like thunder. Hi Tanisha, I followed your story closely, from the viral video to the courtroom audio, to tonight's headline, True You becomes fastest selling black-owned toy brand in US history.
We'd love to talk.
Have you considered turning your journey into a film? We see power here, hope, and a message the world needs. Ava Carter, original content development. Netflix. Tanisha stared at the screen. She had no words. She hadn't considered it. Not really. Who thinks about a movie when they're trying to survive? But maybe that was the point. Her story, the erasure, the rebuilding, wasn't just hers. It belonged to every girl who had ever been told no in a voice that really meant, not you. Maybe this film wouldn't be about revenge, or even success. Maybe it would be about seeing yourself, finally, and refusing to flinch. She was still reading the message when her phone vibrated again. This time it wasn't Hollywood. It was Camille. Her voice was breathless. You're not gonna believe who just asked to settle, and what they're offering to keep this out of the Supreme Court. Tanisha had always thought success would feel like safety. That if she could just prove herself loud enough, boldly enough, the world would finally stop questioning her worth. But now, even as her company reached new heights, as bank accounts filled and interviews poured in, she found herself lying awake at night, unable to shake the feeling that someone somewhere was still trying to take something from her. Success had changed her zip code, but not her nervous system. Every day brought new attention. Emails from celebrities, panels, profiles in magazines that once ignored her emails. She smiled for cameras, wore fitted blazers for cover shoots, answered questions with practiced grace. But underneath the applause was something darker: exhaustion masked as composure, fear masked as professionalism, and pressure. Pressure to say the right thing, to be the symbol people needed, to stay on brand, to be every black girl's blueprint, every brand's ideal of resilience. She felt it in interviews where hosts leaned forward too eagerly, waiting for her to cry on cue. She felt it in meetings with licensing agents, smiling too wide, pushing for partnerships that diluted her mission. Every contract came with fine print. Every handshake came with caveats. And then came the people. Old friends. Some hadn't spoken to her in years. Suddenly they appeared in her inbox with phrases like, "Just wanted to check in," and "Remember when we used to dream about this?" Some meant well. Others didn't. One sent a contract pretending to want to invest, then tried to slide in a backdoor IP clause. Another, a former mentor, tried to reframe Tanisha's success as a result of her early guidance, despite never having lifted a finger when Tanisha needed help. Trust became expensive. Time, even more so. She stopped answering unknown numbers. She started triple-checking every line of every deal. Camille remained her firewall, her shield. But even Camille couldn't protect her from the weight of memory. Certain questions during interviews began to trigger her in ways she hadn't prepared for. A host once asked, "What advice would you give your younger self?" And her throat closed. Another casually said, "It must have felt amazing to prove them wrong." And she blinked, suddenly remembering the laughter in that conference room. The sound, the air, the faces that turned away. There were nights she woke up in sweat, convinced someone had erased her again, wiped her name, taken the dolls, started over without her. She'd scramble to check her site, confirm her name was still there, her photos still up. The trauma hadn't left. It had simply learned how to wear better clothes. Then came the invitation that cracked something wide open. A major broadcast network was hosting a televised panel called Innovation After Impact. It was being billed as a reconciliation forum, the new frontier of transparency and business ethics. Tanisha was on the shortlist to headline, but so was Grant Holloway. Her former CEO, the man who erased her, laughed at her, sued her. She stared at the email for a long time. Camille was blunt on their call. "You don't owe him your presence. You don't need to share a stage with him to prove anything. The world already knows what he did." "I know," Tanisha said quietly, and she did know. But still, something inside her burned to confront him. Not in court filings or viral clips, but in real time, face to face. Let the world see what accountability looked like when it stood across from the damage it caused. She agreed to appear. The days leading up to the broadcast were filled with rehearsals, press previews, hair and wardrobe fittings. The studio sent a car. The set was sleek, sterile, white lights, soft chairs, multiple angles. The audience was small but select. Industry insiders, media, a few carefully chosen members of the public. The topic of the panel was framed as redemption, representation and responsibility. The host, a polished journalist known for moderating heated conversations, welcomed them both with a manufactured warmth. Tenisha sat on the left, Grant on the right. She hadn't seen him in person since the day she left her desk in silence. Humiliated and erased. Now he looked smaller, less smug, but no less dangerous. The interview began with scripted questions. The host asked Tenisha about her journey, her dolls, the emotional toll of fighting for ownership. She answered with calm precision. No embellishments, no theatrics, just the truth. Then came the pivot. And Mr. Holloway, the host turned, voice honeyed. You faced significant backlash. Some say it ended your career. What have you learned from all this? Grant leaned forward, his expression practiced, voice controlled. I've learned that leadership means accountability, that sometimes impact matters more than intention, and that innovation often emerges from unexpected places. Tenisha kept her face still, but her hands resting on her lap, curled slightly. The host nodded. So you accept that you were wrong, Grant smiled. I accept that things could have been handled differently. But look where we are now. He turned, looking directly at Tenisha, then back at the audience. I mean, without me, she wouldn't be here. I created the environment that brought this idea to life. Sometimes, disruption needs pressure. The words hung in the air like smoke. Tenisha blinked once. The room was silent. Then she leaned forward. You didn't create anything, she said, her voice a scalpel. You silenced me. You mocked me. You tried to bury my name, my vision, my worth. You sued me, and now you want to rewrite the story as if you handed me a mic instead of a gag. She turned slightly toward the audience, toward the camera. Let the record show. Success after erasure is not a thank you. It's a resurrection, one I did on my own terms. The audience burst into applause. The host tried to regain control, but the moment had already belonged to her. And yet, just as she thought the segment was wrapping, a production assistant rushed on stage and whispered something into the host's ear. The host's eyes widened. She turned back to the camera. We've just received confirmation, she said breathlessly. In breaking news, a class action lawsuit has just been filed by 7 former employees from Grant Holloway's previous company, alleging long-term patterns of racial discrimination and intellectual property theft. The suit includes evidence from multiple internal recordings and documents previously sealed. Tenisha turned to Grant. His face was pale now. The audience erupted in whispers. But her phone buzzed again, this time with a name she hadn't seen in years. Her college roommate, Alana, the first person who ever told her Maya was genius. Messaging. They used my prototype too. We need to talk. 14. Live reckoning on national TV. Word count. The air in the studio was different now. The kind of electric silence that didn't beg for drama. It waited for truth. The breaking news of the class action lawsuit had detonated like a grenade. Whispers still buzzed in the audience, and even the host looked momentarily unmoored. But Tenisha didn't flinch. Her eyes stayed locked on Grant Holloway, who now sat rigid, jaw clenched, his signature smugness cracking under the fluorescent heat of exposure. And then the moment hung there, stretched between discomfort and decision. The host tried to pivot. Tenisha, given what's just been revealed, and everything you've endured, do you have a response? Tenisha inhaled slowly, not to calm herself, but to center. There would be no screaming, no vengeance, no performative rage, just clarity, truth spoken with the kind of restraint that power could never mimic. She leaned toward the mic. What you've all witnessed today isn't just the story of one stolen idea, it's the story of a system designed to reward the erasure of black brilliance while monetizing our trauma. A murmur rippled through the crowd. She continued, voice steady. Let me say this clearly. I do not owe my success to the man who tried to erase me. And I do not owe gratitude to the pain that forced me to rebuild myself. I owe it to the little girl inside me, the one who drew dolls in the margins of her notebook while the world told her that realism came in one color. Grant shifted in his seat. Tanisha didn't stop. When I walked into that holiday party and made a wish, a simple heartfelt wish, I was laughed at. Laughed at by the same people who now call themselves allies. They didn't see vision. They saw a black woman stepping outside the script they assigned me, and when I didn't fold, they punished me. She turned directly toward him now. And you didn't just mock me. You turned around and built an empire from my blueprints, hoping no one would notice the ink on your hands. The host looked stunned. Grant's mouth opened slightly, as if searching for a line that would neutralize it all. But Tanisha wasn't finished, and now, as the truth surfaces, your only defense is to suggest that without you, I wouldn't be standing here. That's the narrative you cling to, isn't it? That my resilience owes you credit. Let me ask you something. She leaned in further. If I hand someone a hammer and they break my window, do I owe them thanks for showing me where the cracks were? Gasps echoed. Grant stood up suddenly. I won't sit here and be villainized, he snapped. This is character assassination. Tanisha blinked, then looked at the audience. It's not character assassination. It's character clarity. He froze. The host tried to interject, but the momentum had shifted entirely. People weren't watching a panel anymore. They were watching a reckoning. Live, unedited, unforgiving. Grant muttered something about legal counsel and stormed off the stage, nearly knocking over a camera on his way out. The audience didn't clap. They didn't cheer. They just sat, wide-eyed, witnessing the end of a lie they had seen protected too long. Tanisha turned back to the host. We don't want to be symbols, she said. We want to be safe. We want our work credited, our ideas protected, our names remembered. That's not radical. That's human. The host, clearly shaken, nodded slowly. Thank you, Tanisha, for your courage, for your clarity, and for not letting this moment be rewritten. The show cut to commercial. Backstage, her team erupted. Not in celebration, but in stunned, speechless awe. Camille pulled her into a tight hug. That wasn't just a statement, she whispered. That was history. But Tanisha didn't feel triumphant. She felt hollowed out. Not empty, just used up. Like everything she'd been carrying had finally been laid bare, and now all that remained was silence. The car ride home was quiet. No music, no notifications. Her phone was off. For once, she didn't want to see headlines or hashtags. She didn't want to scroll through praise. She just wanted to sit in the stillness of her own survival. She arrived at her apartment after midnight. The city was asleep, draped in winter fog. She kicked off her shoes, poured a glass of water, and sat at the kitchen table, staring at nothing. The echoes of the day swirled in her mind. The lights, the crowd, the confrontation. The little girl's voice from the conference still haunted her. That's me. Then, a knock. Soft, brief. She tensed. No one came to her door, unannounced. She opened it slowly. No one was there. Just a small padded envelope on her welcome mat. No return address. No logo. Just her name, handwritten in thick black ink. She brought it inside, heart pounding. She peeled back the flap. Inside was a single item. A sticky note. Old. Faded. Slightly bent at the corner. The handwriting hers. A toy line for girls like me. Brown skin. Natural hair. Real stories. Real power. She stared at it. It was the original Christmas wish. The one she had submitted anonymously at that godforsaken holiday party. The one Grant had read out loud, mocking, condescending, in front of the entire company. She hadn't seen it since that day. She turned the note over. No message. No signature. Just one more line, written in faint blue ink beneath her own. You were never wrong. As her eyes welled, her phone buzzed. A new email. Subject line: Urgent international counterfeit dolls found in Nigeria, UAE, and Brazil, manufactured using your designs. The sticky note now lived behind glass. Tanisha had framed it in matte black, not for aesthetic, but as a symbol. The paper was yellowed, curled slightly at the corners, and the ink was fading. But to her it was more sacred than any award, feature, or funding deal. It hung on the wall right outside her office, centered deliberately at eye level. The first thing you saw before stepping into the space where decisions were made. A toy line for girls like me. Brown skin. Natural hair. Real stories. Real power. Employees stopped when they passed it. Visitors asked about it. Interns stood quietly before it like it was a monument. And when someone new was hired at True You, Tanisha personally told them the story. Not just of the idea, but of what was stolen, what was fought for, and what was ultimately reclaimed. Because that was the point. Not the sales. Not the media tours, not the accolades, but the restoration. She didn't want to just build a company. She wanted to build a place where brilliance didn't have to scream to be believed. Since the day the audio clip went viral, and the company finally collapsed under the weight of its own lies, True You had become more than a brand. It had become a blueprint, a rallying cry. The doll line now included over a dozen characters, STEM creators, dancers, activists, poets, engineers. Each came with a storybook, affirmations, and now, through a new digital app, interactive content for young girls to write their own narratives. Tenisha had invested in more than dolls. She opened a mentorship lab called True Code, a training space for black girls aged 9–16 to learn coding, 3D modeling, and product design. She hired women from underrepresented tech backgrounds to lead it, building an ecosystem where ideas didn't have to be filtered through whiteness to be seen as genius. Every week she walked the halls of the growing headquarters, now 3 floors in a downtown building, and made sure she wasn't just running a company, but shaping a culture. No one at True You was allowed to ask, "Is this marketable?" before asking, "Who are we building for?" Tenisha had learned the hard way what happens when capital replaces community. She still had flashbacks. She still winced at unexpected moments. Sometimes, during interviews, her throat would tighten when a host used the word resilient, like it was a badge of honor instead of the scar tissue it truly was. But healing wasn't linear, and Tenisha had found strength, not in forgetting but in remembering differently. She had also taken Camille's advice and pursued international enforcement after the counterfeit alert. It turned out Grant Holloway, even after his public disgrace, had secretly partnered with a shell distributor operating in Lagos and São Paulo, trying to offload unauthorized clones of Maya and Zuri dolls to overseas toy markets that lacked regulation. It was a violation so blatant it turned global sympathy into outrage again, this time leading to a sweeping injunction, enforced with the help of international trade watchdogs. Even when they're exposed, Camille had said grimly, they still think they're entitled to the profits. Tenisha didn't flinch. She launched a global expansion, not just in sales, but in story. The new dolls included a Nigerian robotics prodigy, a Caribbean eco-warrior, and a Palestinian medical dreamer. The world needed to see itself in children's toys. She wasn't waiting for permission to make that happen. Her board of advisors now included teachers, psychologists, and social workers, all black women. No more all-white decision tables pretending to understand the world outside their bubble. No more performative partnerships. True, you didn't exist to be palatable. It existed to be unapologetically true. But even in success, she never stopped scanning for the overlooked. It was a Friday afternoon in December, just a week before the company's end-of-year holiday party. She was in her office, going over rollout plans for the spring launch of True You Teens, an extension of the doll line for older girls, when her assistant knocked lightly and slid a laptop into view. "Email just came through from an old intern," she said. "Thought you'd want to see it." Tenisha took the laptop, slightly distracted, until she read the subject line. "Not sure who to send this to, but I remember what you said about not letting dreams die quietly." She clicked. The body of the email was raw, honest, nervous. "Hi, Miss Moore. You probably don't remember me. My name's Asia. I interned for you the summer before I went back to community college. I was the one who accidentally double-ordered your oat lattes for 2 weeks straight. Sorry again. I've been working on something in private. Just sketches and notes, and a rough prototype I made with a glue gun, and courage. I've always dreamed of seeing an autistic black girl, as a doll, one that stims, one that wears headphones for sensory comfort, one that isn't treated like a charity case, but like a leader. I didn't pitch it back then. I didn't think anyone would take it seriously. But then I saw the sticky note in your hallway. And I remembered what you said during our last intern session. If you think your idea is too small to matter, ask yourself who benefits from you thinking that. So, here's my idea. No pressure. But I figured if anyone might see it, it's you. Thank you for showing us that truth doesn't have to stay buried." Asia J. Tenisha didn't realize she was crying until the tears hit the trackpad. She opened the attached file. It was a scanned notebook page. Pen sketches, uneven but bursting with clarity. A doll with headphones, a fidget band around her wrist, a t-shirt that read, "I see the world differently. That's my superpower." Her name? Nova. Tenisha whispered it out loud. Nova. She leaned back, eyes wet, throat tight. It was like looking into a mirror she didn't know she needed. Not of herself, but of what she had become. Not the CEO with perfect press coverage, but the woman who once dared to write a stupid Christmas wish on a sticky note and was laughed at. Now someone else had dared, and this time the door was wide open. She hit reply. Dear Asia, I not only remember you, I never forgot your grace. This is the best pitch I've read in months. Let's schedule a call next week. I think the world is ready for Nova, and more importantly, I think the world needs you. Thank you for trusting me with this. Tenisha. She closed the laptop, stood, and looked once more at the sticky note framed on the wall. That note, once crumpled, once mocked, had become scripture, a seed-turned monument, a reminder that no vision rooted in truth is ever truly small. As she turned off her office light, her phone buzzed one last time. A message from a private number. They're trying to license Nova overseas before your paperwork clears. Same factories. Same tactic. I warned you once. I'm warning you again. If you've ever been silenced, overlooked, or told your ideas didn't belong, you felt what Tenisha lived. Type yes in the comments if you believe black voices deserve to be protected, not stolen. What would you do if your dream was mocked by the very people meant to support you? Subscribe for more true stories that fight back against injustice. Because silence only protects the powerful.